special budget meeting of May 8, 2024 to order. And on behalf of all of us, acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Wasanich people who possessed and had possession of and responsibility for these lands for millennia and cared for them, lived, learned, and worked on them. I also wish to acknowledge attending with us at the board meeting is the management team, Superintendent Everwood, Secretary Treasurer Reed, Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, and Director of Instruction Hunter on the screen. Regrets from Director of Instruction Westhaver. I wish to welcome our partner group representatives as well. I see Ms. Suzanne Chisholm. Suzanne.
No, why not? Because they're
For the Saanich Administrators Association. I see Ms. Candace Whitney for QP 441. Welcome, Candace. Mr. Don Peterson, the President of the Saanich Teachers Association. Yes, thank you for those gestures of respect. Welcome. And I don't see yet Ms. Megan Mizovic, the President of Federation of Parent Advisory Councils of Saanich, but if she is able to tune in with us, then welcome to her too. Trustees, is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Trustee Murphy, seconded by Trustee Elder. Are there any late items or proposed revisions? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The agenda is adopted as circulated. I'll turn then to item 3, which is the discussion on the 2024-2025 budget, and first a report from the Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you, Chair. My report will be pretty brief because the approach for balancing the budget has been discussed in the Budget Advisory Committee and Finance, Facilities, and Technology, and recommendations to those discussions are coming for consideration by the board this evening. So, Budget Advisory Committee met last Thursday, May 2nd, and following a review of the consultation results, the committee formed consensus on a number of issues. The first being that there were no potential budget reductions that were considered advisable or even palatable at this stage. That there may be revenue enhancements that are possible, but not possible in the short term. Would be some things that could be considered in future budgets. The committee formed consensus that the budget should be balanced through allocation of contingency reserve to the extent necessary, and that the board would then need to develop a plan to reestablish budget sustainability. And the fourth area of consensus was the importance of continued advocacy for funding for inflationary costs. So those are the 4 areas where the Budget Advisory Committee formed consensus. And the committee moved a recommendation through to the Finance and Facilities Committee that was that the 24-25 budget be balanced by allocating contingency reserve as required, and that staff be directed to develop a plan to address the structural budget shortfall. So these recommendations were reviewed earlier this week by the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee, and the FF&T Committee put 3 motions forward for board consideration this evening. I've put these motions on the screen. The first motion is that the 24-25 budget be balanced by allocating $922,967 in contingency reserve to fund the budgetary items that are outlined in the table on the screen. The second motion was that staff be directed to create a plan with options to address the structural budget shortfall with a report provided to the board in the fall of 2024. And the third option is that the board, or third recommendation, is that The board expresses appreciation to the Budget Advisory Committee, community members who participated in the community budget meeting and survey, and students who participated in student voice sessions. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Trustees, you may recall that in years past, as we embarked on the discussion and decision for the annual budget, preliminary budget, the practice was that we would move into committee of the whole, have the discussion, make recommendation, then move out of committee of the whole to the board, and the board deal with the recommendation. Of late, in recent years, we haven't been doing that. We've been really moving informal consideration of the matter. And the result of that, if that's what the board chooses to do, is that the usual rules with respect to the length of time of debate or discussion, the number of times a trustee may speak are relaxed, and indeed an opportunity for representatives of our partners to ask questions. And so I would propose and seek agreement from the board at this point that we move into informal consideration of this question, the budget, and that coincident with that, we offer an opportunity to our partners to ask questions at this time before we engage in debate.
Agreed.
Is there any objection to that, trustees? All right, that is agreed then. We have moved into informal consideration, and at this time, I'll offer the opportunity to our partner representatives to ask any questions or make any statements about the budget or the proposed questions relating to the budget before the board delves into its discussion and decision. So if you have anything to ask or say, please show us a hand, a flag, a wink, a disrespectful gesture as before, or whatever you like. Right, thank you, friends. I'm not seeing anything. And so we'll move then into the informal discussion by the board. Trustee McMurphy?
I just have one question, and I didn't think of this sooner. But when I see it up on the screen, I'm reading it again. And in motion number 2, they're all up for consideration, are they? I can go to 2.
They would be moved one at a time, but we're
Informal.
we're informal.
I'm just wondering, in motion 2, the staff be directed to create a plan with options to address the structural budget shortfall with a report provided to the board in the fall of 2024. I just want to confirm that is more of a process motion than a command motion, in the sense that we're not requiring that we have a balanced budget for the next round. It's just looking at options that may or may not create.
That's my understanding, Trustee McMurphy, but I'll invite staff to comment.
Yeah, it is to look at options to be implemented, re-achieving structural balance in the budget, but not necessarily in 24, 25, but maybe in 25, 26.
Or it may not happen ever. Yeah.
Correct.
That's a possibility. Yeah, okay. That's just what I wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Albert.
Thank you, Chair. I would add to that I want it to be understood in motion 2 that there is an urgency that comes with that review that will be shared with government through advocacy. That the balancing of the budget this year, should the first motion pass, puts a pressure on the budget going forward beyond next year of about $1.6 million of unsustainable structural shortfall. And it's entirely likely that going into 25, 26, we would not have the capacity to even meet those obligations, that $1.6 million of structural shortfall, let alone another $1 million of structural shortfall that's likely to emerge the following year because of unfunded inflationary pressures. So this is fairly soft, saying we want options for addressing the structural shortfall. But within that is a real and deep concern that that structural shortfall is a large number, $1.6 million, and it's not sustainable. So I'm not sure how, I don't know if it needs to be put into the motion in some way that we have to find a way through advocacy to convince the government that that is a lot more of a challenge. Address the structural shortfall doesn't sound like that big a deal. But it's a very big deal, and then if we do address the structural shortfall, we have to make $1.6 million worth of cuts. And it's because of unfunded inflationary pressure. So I'm not proposing that that motion be changed, but just that there be that clear understanding of that urgency.
It's a worthwhile point, I think, Trustee Elder, and it may, while you're not seeking an amendment tonight, it may be worth considering a motion when the report is delivered by staff in the fall. What do we do with it then? Thank you. Other discussion, comments, trustees? In the absence of further discussion generally, I would open the floor to moving the first motion. Trustee
I'm
Elder.
sorry, I do have another general comment. I mean, it relates to motion 3, and rather than move an amendment once it's on the floor, I see what's missing from there is staff and parents. And we had a lot of involvement of staff district-wide in meetings, through survey responses, and we've heard from our representatives from management group, SAA specifically, from QP 441, from the STA, and from parents, that there's been a lot of feedback solicited from members of those groups and brought to this table through the budget advisory committee by their representatives. So I think not acknowledging staff and parents as being significant contributors and therefore deserving appreciation is an oversight that we should correct before the motion hits the floor.
So perhaps when we get to motion 3, Trustee Elder, we could, with the agreement of the board, of course, add the words and staff and parents after community members or wherever you might prefer to include them.
For me, I think it wouldn't capture their involvement through their representatives. If we just say we thank them for the budget meeting and the survey, I think the most significant involvement has been through their representatives by having, there were lots of meetings out there when they talked about these things. And we haven't referenced that here. So it may even be that it's a separate, after another comma, between another pair of commas that says staff and parents for their extensive engagement.
Well, why don't you consider that, Trustee Elder, while we work through the earlier ones? And when we get to motion 3, you may have an amendment for us too. Trustee McMurphy.
And we're still in the informal consideration.
Yes, we are.
I'm thinking of proposing something like this, that the board develop an advocacy plan to address the structural budget deficit well in advance of budget deliberations for 25-26.
So that relates to motion 2, the earlier discussion.
Another motion, yeah.
So it'd be a
But
separate
yeah,
motion.
I found this year that, and last year, we're lobbying government long past the time when their decisions have already been made, and I think we need to get our oar in like early as the fall kind of thing to start saying, listen, hang on a minute, we have a problem here.
I'll go to you in a second, Trustee Hickman, Superintendent.
Just a point to note that with the election in the fall, there will be no active MLAs. There will be people representing the various ministries, and the new cabinet probably won't be sworn in until December.
Good point.
So I'm not sure that an advocacy plan that's communicated to government in the fall will actually have much effect. We probably have to wait until January for that, and then we're back into the same budget cycle.
But again, a worthwhile thought, Trustee McMurphy, and it may be worth reconsideration if you decide not to put it on the floor when the report is delivered in the fall. We can talk about that. Yeah. Thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Hickman.
Superintendent took every word out of my mouth, and so I have nothing to say.
So you've been following politics closely.
Well, a little bit, in that I remembered that we would not have MLAs to advocate with.
All right. I don't want to cut anybody off. If there are any final comments, Trustee Hickman again.
The only thing I'm thinking is the Budget Advisory Committee is made up of our partner groups, and representatives of our partner groups. So in effect, we are thanking them when we thank the Budget Advisory Committee, are we not?
Well, in a
Not
generic,
that it matters, I mean, we can.
general way we are. But I think Trustee Elder's point is that we can specify more clearly. But we'll deal with that amendment if and when we get to it. Trustee Elder?
Since we're still in the informal, I think appreciation of Budget Advisory Committee is is saying thank you to the president of the Standard Teachers Association. But it's not saying thank you to all the teachers.
That's fair. Fair point.
As an example.
And to be fair, trustees, when we move by agreement into informal, that applies for this entire process, not only discussion, but the discussion and debate on the motions. Until we move out, if we ever do. Anything else, folks, before we go to the motions themselves? All right, let's consider motion one if someone's prepared to move it. Trustee Elder.
Are we still in it? Can we do debate motions while informal?
Yes, we can.
So we don't have the usual speak twice rules because we're informal. It's just
We don't.
full open debate. I move motion one as presented.
Is there a second? Trustee Van Well. Trustee Elder?
I believe there's nothing else to say. It's been thoroughly discussed for many weeks.
Trustee McMurphy? No? Anybody? You sure? I'll put the question then. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee Elder?
Thank you, Chair. I'll move motion two as presented.
Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Vandal? Anything to say this time, Trustee Elder? Anybody else? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The second motion is carried. And moving then to the third proposed motion.
I'll move motion three, but I'll read it because it's different. It's different, Secretary Treasurer. I know you're keeping mad track of this. I would suggest it be different by removing the and before students. Putting a comma in where the period is. Oxford comma. And saying, and staff and parents for their extensive involvement throughout the process.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee McMurphy? Trustee Elder, if you wish to speak.
No, I have, thank you.
Yes, you have. Anybody else? All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is carried. Is there anything else relating to this, trustees? Trustee McMurphy?
I'm going to try my motion with a slight change.
Okay.
That the board develop an advocacy plan to address the structural budget deficit in advance of budget deliberations for 25-26.
Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Hickman? McMurphy?
I appreciate the debate and the comments that were made earlier. What I did is I took out the word well, so it just means that we get started on it early and later rather than follow each other, is what I was first thinking.
Trustee Hickman?
I would suggest that we actually develop the plan in November with the idea that we launch it in January. Like have that conversation early, have a plan, and then be ready to.
Right.
Others? Mr. Reed, do you have the motion? Could you read it for us? Is that it there? Go ahead, so you plan to address the budget shortfall well and
Advance of the budget deliberation.
the well came out, did it not, trustee?
And I actually said, I don't know if it makes any difference, but I actually said the structural budget deficit.
You said the structural deficit advanced for budget deliberations for
Yeah.
25-26.
So shortfall becomes deficit and well is deleted.
Structural.
Is that correct?
Structural budget deficit.
So deficit.
Structural budget.
Deficit. Sorry.
Thank you. So we have the motion. It's been seconded. We had trustee Hickman suggesting that it's not part of the motion, but we consider dealing with it in November. Is there any further discussion on the motion? It's right there, trustee Silzer, that the board develop an advocacy plan to address the structural budget deficit in advance of the budget deliberations for 2025, 2026.
In the best of all possible worlds, we might not have to do it,
Wouldn't that be,
Yes.
that'd be nice?
just in case. We'll have it just in
Just in
case,
case.
just in very,
Slim
very
chance. we
rare
need it.
slim chance.
Now, there is informal discussion, trustee McMurphy, and then there's something beyond that.
We're getting something category.
We're getting close.
Getting close to something category.
Trustees, thank you. Is there any further discussion or debate on the motion? That's on the floor. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Trustee McMurphy.
I appreciate the motion of the staff and parents for their extensive involvement throughout the process, but I would like to move this. I had nothing to drink before. I think I should have. Specific motion, I'd like to move that acknowledgement be given to the Secretary Treasurer and his staff for their diligent and excellent work through this process.
So the motion is that the board acknowledge the Secretary Treasurer and his staff for their diligent and excellent work throughout the process. Is that it, Trustee McMurphy? Is there a second? Trustee Van Wel. I can't imagine there's any debate about that. Trustee Allen.
I just would believe that it was the board acknowledged.
Those were my words, if Trustee McMurphy is agreeable. So the motion, the board acknowledge the Secretary Treasurer and his staff for their diligent work throughout the
I
process.
think I said diligent and excellent.
Excellent.
Diligent and excellent work, yes. Thank you. Right. Got it. Thank you. Any further discussion? Any discussion at all, trustees? All in favor? Opposed? Just kidding. The motion's carried. Now,
Way too much hilarity for the budget situation that we're facing.
Sorry.
Trustee McMurphy, you have anything
My
else?
fault, sorry.
Trustee Allen.
Just note that the Finance Facilities and Technology Committee meeting yesterday has these motions going forward to the regular board meeting of next week, which is natural out of FF&T. So I believe that these will be reflected as a list of the motions that were passed tonight. And be acknowledged as such in the agenda next week rather than the motions to be approved.
I think that's correct. It's in some fashion, Mr. Reed.
Well, I think the motions that were put forward, the three motions that were put forward by FF&T, we are creating the report from FF&T. We will just put in here for information that the following three motions will move to the May 8th,
a special board meeting.
And then the 5 motions that actually get passed will be reflected.
Order, one thing at a time, very good, thank you. Well, that completes the agenda, trustees. Thank you. Is there any objection to adjourning for the hockey game?
I think we should stick around and we should discuss.
We are adjourned.
Yes, category 12.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.